Nice to see you. It's a shame that we can't have the Euro from Belarus right now here.
Why doesn't work? Okay, just.
Just here. Can I?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Here you go.
Okay, so let's begin with my topic. I will speak about Belarus. And how come it's, first of all, part of this Eastern Partnership, and second of all, whether it has any future in it, and whether it's actually deviating from the path EU is trying to establish. The contents, I will be very brief, extremely brief on the background, since it's pretty simple, the picture. It might have a lot of details, but the picture is pretty simple, and then give some recommendation to EU towards what should be improved, and expand the last recommendation, which is connected with the new project, integration project that started in Eurasia. So, on the whole, Belarusian relations with EU started relatively well. It wanted to integrate itself in the West, but that totally changed with the inauguration of Lukashenko, 1994, and the most important thing that took place was in 1996 when a referendum. Something like a super presidential system was established, and he could control the parliament. So this was perceived by the Council on behalf of the EU as impediment to democracy. So they decided right at this time, when the partnership agreement should have been signed by all the countries, they decided that they would freeze the process and leave a backdoor if things go well. But nevertheless, since then there have been many elections for parliamentary and Lukashenko posts, and even though there are some improvements in election codes and so on, in the last parliamentary elections in 2012, the things remained the same. There was repression, and in the end the whole parliament was filled with pro-Lukashenko members. So the last notion of the Council is that the freezing of the process will continue until October 2013. So let's concentrate now on why is Belarus actually important. We know that it's like the black sheep of the Eastern Partnership, but there are some implications for the Eastern Partnership on itself. First of all, it exhibits it's also well known in other policies, the fragmentation of the institutional design of the EU, but it exhibits also the constraints of this new policy, this new part of the foreign policy, as the EU cannot provide, as we said earlier, where they can meet, discuss. There is a Euronest Parliamentary Assembly, but it's without any effect. It's just a discussion body. It's not even asked for counseling. Also, the implication of Belarus here is in connection with the enlargement, because probably you know that Eastern Partnership, the design of the policy is more or less mechanical transfer from the enlargement. All these programs and targets that have to be achieved. So it also implicates that there is a problem in the enlargement, and we here are seeing lack of capacity in the enlargement, which goes to the neighbourhood policy. And of course, as a regional actor, EU it tries to be a promoter of its values, as we spoke earlier, but it somehow is not able to. And therefore, it's very important to include Belarus in a comprehensive policy. First of all, because the context around it is no longer positive, has no longer positive impact on the development of Belarus. What is meant here are the countries around, on security, and it has implications for the border security and drug smuggling, and also problems with immigration. And as we well know, Belarus and Ukraine are the two transit countries for gas from Russia. Before starting with the recommendations, I just wanted to show something that I found. And even though it's being widely criticized for many human rights issues, I thought that we have some Czech representatives here. So I decided to include that too. And surprisingly, women actually, you might be concerned since women are well represented here, are well represented also in the Belarusian parliament. And it's the percentage is 30%, around 30%, and it's normal basis. So at least this concern that even though people expect that all the sides of human rights and so on will be damaged and not kept there might be signs for EU that should be taken into consideration, because they can be impetus for change. If you have, for example, equality of sexes there, it can improve other aspects. So before giving the policy recommendations, it's important to say that because Belarus has such negative scenario, it's important not to give too much or such a big carrot to it, because at least Ukraine would think that it's not really equal, and this would be a double standard, because Belarus is not keeping any of the promises or of the recommendations so far. So what should be recommended here is that EU should adopt a more practical approach and not so much concentrate on values, because they don't have any ground there. That's evident. And for both of the sides, for EU and for Belarus, it's more important to, for Belarus, it's mostly important to have economic relations with EU, so there is where we should start. So we should concentrate on purely economical and cultural cooperation, plus concessions to the citizens, so that they see the viability of this alternative also. In order that to start, it's very important to reset the framework, since there is no framework. There are no partnership and cooperation agreements, there are no targets, so this either should be abolished or signed in an accelerated way. And under this rest of the framework, this was already included in the partnership in the Neighbourhood instrument for 2014-2020, a synergy with domestic policies, and it actually works with Estonia and some other countries, but more can be done through the domestic policies of the EU, because Belarus has some connections with the neighbors. Actually, the civil society of Belarus, which we might see later, is very active in the civil society forum, and it's probably one of the most positive things that we can see in Belarus, or at least the single positive thing coming out of the country. And but from it come some criticisms towards how the programs are organized for Belarus. For example, very often there are two too detailed, and this is a restraint for proposals and so on. So it was even recognized by the Commission itself that it would be better to have strategic priorities for things like promotion of democracy, because in that way neither the institutions nor the people will be hindered. Also another proposal is removal of the cost of proposals, and as I said, reaching out to broader layers. I mean, not only pro-European NGOs and political NGOs. And here what can serve as a best incentive to the people is at least partial removal of the visas for people, for example, with disabilities or children, and for example, for increase of cultural and educational increase of this cultural education experiences with other countries. And this is a personal recommendation that this can serve actually as a European bomb in Belarus, the establishment of Jean Monnet Center. And the last aspect of the neighborhood policy in Belarus is actually increasing the viability of the European alternative, because there is already another alternative that was set out by the Russian president, and it's set to be established in 2015. So you might have heard about the Eurasian Union. So just some quick detail. It's the Commonwealth of Independent States, which was established after the disintegration of the USSR. It actually served as a platform, and it was mostly discussion assembly. But some of the projects were envisaged like a free trade and economic space, and they actually already are functioning since 2012. And the idea behind now is for them to be governed under the World Trade Organization rules, and but this is actually a problem because Belarus is part of the Eurasian Union, and it's the disproportionate country there. And I will have to miss some of the points, but just a quick. So my point here is to prove that Belarus is actually more inclined towards joining the Eurasian Union. First, because in 1999 there was already the notion of unification with Russia, which was well perceived by the people. Also, here what was planned by the Eurasian Union is a proposal of the Commission that was to increase the economic cooperation between the neighborhood countries and to establish something like common economic space, but under a European agenda, which was to be called the Neighbourhood Economic Community. But I think because this didn't work out well, it was somehow practically stolen. And really, Belarus could find a better alternative to that, and it already has an increase of its foreign trade with Vietnam and China. Also, in terms of what can be offered by the neighborhood and by prospective membership of freedom of movement, there is already freedom of movement in the Eurasian territory, and Belarus is the leader in receiving visas for the Schengen area. It has 428,000 C-type visas, which is comparable only to Turkey, which has 7 times more population. Monetary policy is, on the whole, not thinkable because it means for them going back to Russia and losing of the so important state sovereignty, which was won over big problems. And actually, the establishment of the institutional design of the Eurasian Commission and the Parliamentary Assembly, they show that it's a weaker structure than the EU, and that their intergovernmentalism can play a greater role. So for Lukashenko, that would be better because he might have a greater role. And moreover, these are partners who have been playing this game for a long time. So the three presidents, I mean, of Russia and Belarus and Kazakhstan, they also have friends. So on the whole, to finish, it's most probable that Belarus will continue to stagnate and encapsulate, and it will be gradually devoured into the Eurasian Union. So apart from the last three recommendations, it's most important for EU to improve its credibility as an actor and as an alternative, but moreover also to find a way to include itself in the new project by probably providing expertise in the Eurasian Commission, because thus this can lead to a liberalization of the trade, which is mostly important in this case through the WTO rules. And